If there was 2 million Israelites in Egypt, why did God go bother Moses? Moses had ran away. He killed somebody. Why are you bothering that? Moses was 80. I know the Prince of Egypt made him look like he was 15. Gave him a nice little fade and lined his goatee up in the animation. He was an 80-year-old man. Why are you bothering that 80-year-old man? And here's what the revelation of the Lord gave me. It's that he wanted to write his law down for somebody. He wanted to write his law down for his people. But he had to give his law to somebody who could read. And in a nation full of slaves, none of them could. But the one who could, the one who got an education was Moses. And I don't know that Moses would have ever wrote. He didn't. I don't know if he ever felt like his ability to read and write made him special. And I'm sharing that with you because I'm going, you have an ability that I don't think you think is that special. And it could be the difference maker for our nation.
Seriously, Pastor Bruh, man, I understand that he wants to be some type of motivational pastor. He wants to tell people that they have talents and that their talents can be utilized for the glorification of their God, their ministry, whatever it is. Just say that this is of my own opinion. Not that your God gave you a revelation. This is how I know Christians be lying through their teeth when they claim that God spoke to them. Because there is absolutely nothing in the Bible that indicates that the reason why Moses was chosen by this so-called God is because he could read, is because he was literate. Because if you remember the story, Moses didn't write the first 10 commandments. The first 10 commandments supposedly were penned by this God. Now you may say that Moses would need to be able to read these laws that was penned by God. Now I have to ask you all the question, and please write it now, write it now. Pause this video after I ask this question for all the Christians, and then I know you're not going to write the comment and you're going to take it away after I explain it. What language did this God write the 10 commandments? What language? Now, I know you paused it. I know you wrote that he wrote it in Hebrew or in Paleo Hebrew. I know that's what you wrote down. But here's the reality. Here's the reality. You're dead ass wrong. There is absolutely no way this God of the Bible could have written the 10 commandments in Paleo Hebrew or even in Hebrew. And here's why. Now, first, let's tackle some of the things that the man said in this video. The first thing is by declaring that nobody else out of the 2 million slaves were literate is actually incorrect. Would the overwhelming majority of the slaves who were doing forced labor and more laborious work, would they be illiterate? Yes, the overwhelming majority. Matter of fact, the overwhelming majority of Egyptians during the time frame of 1800 to 1500 BCE, which is the biblical time frame of Moses, or around 1550, 1 to 5% of all Egyptians were illiterate. The people who weren't were the ones who went through the royal bloodlines. They were the scribes, bureaucrats, artisans. These people, craftsmen, they had levels of literacy. They were at high levels of literacy except for the craftsmen and artisans, but they had levels of literacy. Your overseers would have certain levels of literacy as well, because they're taking account for things. They're going through contracts. They need to understand dimensions, so they would have levels of literacy. But so too would a handful of the Egyptian slaves, of the Israelite slaves. It is acceptable that maybe 1 in 10,000 was literate because of positions that they held. But here's the problem. Here's the thing. Egypt wrote in hieroglyphics. Now, yes, if you went through royal literacy, you would, through this royal schools, which is called the Per Anax. If you went to the Per Anax, yes, you would have learned other languages as well. But some of those languages, yes, would have been Semitic languages. And we have found proof on the Sinai Peninsula of a Semitic language. It's called Semitic. It's called Sinai. It's called, sorry, I'm messing up. It's called Semitic Sinatics. But Semitic Sinatics is a script that was found that is a Semitic script. This doesn't mean it's the Israelites. It could have been any Semitic speaking people. Okay, could have been the Shashu, could have been Phoenicians. You know what becomes Phoenicians? It could have been any other ites, Hittites, Moabites, any ites. Semitic, that's what all the ites are. They are Semitic. But this Semitic Sinaitics is an ancient script that was found in or around some mines that was utilized in order to take the Egyptian hieroglyphics, which could be up to 300 different symbols, break them down into more of an alphabet, into 22 to 30 different symbols representing the alphabets, representing the hieroglyphics. This Semitic Sinaitics is what then later on lasted from about 1800 BCE to 1500 BCE. Then around 1500 BCE to 1200 BCE, we have the Canaanite script. Canaanite script. Think about that. The Canaanite script was during the time frame that Moses actually would have been walking around, right? From 1500 to 1200, because we don't have anything about an Israelite until 1204, and that's through the Meneptah Stela. Before that, if Moses existed based on the Bible calculation, it would be around 1550. So the Canaanite script was just coming into form in and around the time frame that this was supposed to happen. So it either would have been the Semitic Sinaitics, or it would have been the Canaanite script. Now, Canaanite script lasted to about 1200. From 1200 BCE to about from 1200 BCE to about 1000 BCE, we had the Phoenician script. The Phoenician script then separated the Phoenician people from the Canaanite people, the major group of the Canaanite people. That's when they became a separate unit. So they may have moved away maybe 100, 200 years prior, and then developed their own script around 1200. Paleo-Hebrew dates to 1000. 1000. So when the Israelites, who were Canaanites, separated themselves from the main Canaanite group, they would have been writing in the Canaanite script. And it's not till 1000 that the Paleo-Hebrew. So if Moses was around in 1550, then Moses would have been understanding hieroglyphics and the Canaanite script, not Paleo-Hebrew. So it wouldn't have been written in that. But what we know is that because of how this ancient Semitic script developed, there were Israelites who could read or write, who were literate. So his whole case of this is why he was chosen, which is not supported by anything biblical, didn't come about. Wasn't there. Many other people, there were others, 1 in 10,000, who would have been able to write in this Semitic script based on the Sinai Peninsula, based on those who was working those mines, the overseers, those who were slaves for artisans, those who were slaves for craftsmen, those who were slaves for bureaucrats. They would have had certain levels of literacy to be able to be that slave. In the same way how in every slave culture, there is always those certain slaves who work for certain people who did learn how to read and write. Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, they learned how to read and write. There were Roman slaves who learned how to read and write in order to be able to be a good slave to their master and help them with their business, to carry out messages, to carry out different instructions. They had to be able to read and write. So none of them is a complete lie to justify his motivational speech. And the fact that there was no such thing as a Paleo-Hebrew until 1000 BCE, this God had to have written the Ten Commandments in Canaanite script. Most likely, if this story was to be believed, it was in Canaanite script or Phoenician. And when you look at the script, you can see how the ox, the symbol for the ox, is what become Aleph. And that it's just the ox symbol turned to look like an A. Look that up for yourself. I want you to look that up, of how the development from the hieroglyphics to the Paleo-Hebrew, and you'll see how it became the A, and it'll go all the way to the Greek. The G is for a camel. It was a representation of a camel. And then that's why it has the curved hump. That's all it is. These pastors are dangerous when they're just making shit up. So always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.